Welcome to the Trend Report, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Trevor Bloch, and I was Sid's most recent guest on the podcast. As we announced, I'm going to be taking over the Trend Report podcast for the month of March, taking a look at the next generation and their perspectives within our industry. So for those of you who don't know me, again, Trevor Bloch, I work with INDEAL. I am the Partner Engagement Manager. I've been with INDEAL for just under 3 years now, and I've spent a lot of time working with Sid for some of the live production, and he spent a lot of time mentoring me. And so this is one of the really exciting times in my career, being able to take over his podcast from someone who spent hours with me, teaching me how to be on camera and to have a voice that can affect the industry. So just before we jump into today's conversation, over the next 4 weeks, I'm going to be talking to second generations within the industry. I'm a second generation within INDEAL, and joining the industry, I've taken a little bit of a different approach, learning what this industry has to offer. And my guest today is actually one of the first few people that I talked to when joining the industry. And so it's going to be really interesting just to see what their point of view is for some of the greatest opportunities that are kind of held within contract furniture. So I'd like to introduce today's guest. It's Chelsea King from King Business Interiors. How are you doing today, Chelsea?
Hi, Trevor. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing great.
Well, thank you for joining me. So we're going to go through and just talk a little bit about the journey of a second generation in the industry, kind of ask some questions about some of the things that Chelsea's seen. And just to kind of foreshadow what the next month is going to look like, we're going to be talking to people from the design perspective, which we have Chelsea here today. We're going to be talking from the general dealership, manufacturers, and rep groups. We're going to have the widespread of the industry kind of analyzed from a newer set of eyes. So Chelsea, just to start off, would you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now in your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Chelsea King. I'm VP of Design and Marketing here at King Business Interiors. We are a furniture and a flooring dealer located in Columbus, Ohio, as well as a woman-owned and family-owned business. And we are in our second generation. My mother, father are both here. Mother is our owner, visionary, and creator of King. Father is our CFO. And my brother is also here. He is in a sales position, also moving into leadership with me. So it's been an exciting ride to have your family around and grow together.
Absolutely. That's cool that the whole family is involved.
It is. It's an adventure every day. It's fun.
I guarantee you there's no quiet dinners when it comes to holidays, right?
Even, Sunday night dinners are all about furniture. We try not to, but it's hard to not have fun.
Absolutely. So I want to learn a little bit about your journey into the industry. So what kind of got you started in contract furniture, and from when you first kind of walked in the door to this industry to where you got today? Just talk us a little bit through kind of your whole process here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up around the business. My parents started it in 1998, so I was 8 years old. I hear stories of me being racked asleep in a lateral file drawer, and just having fun growing up around in the company and in the office. And eventually I started interning in the library, getting my hands and inspiration growing with colors. And that's kind of when I fell in love with design. And when it came time to decide what I wanted to do after high school, I decided quickly that I was extremely passionate about following in my mom's footsteps. At the time I didn't realize how big they were going to be to fill, but here we are. I went to school for interior architecture and design at Ohio University here in Ohio. And going to interior design school exposed me to how much more design was than just color, but more about the impact that you can have on a space, on people, and those experiences that people have in space.
Interesting. So it's kind of cool listening to the design side of things, because in our industry over the past few years, designers play a huge role for not only the sales side of things, but also for the manufacturers. So in terms of kind of the designing journey, I know one of the things that I've heard a lot about in a lot of the conversations I've had is that being a second generation, we kind of have someone that we can go to ask all of the dumb questions to. So kind of looking at your journey coming up as a designer, what are some of the things that looking back, you realize how a little bit easier you might have had it, but also some of the things that you've seen other people come up through that you can kind of throw some of the tips and tricks at that you were able to learn just from being a second generation? Tell me a little bit about your perspective on your journey versus some of the other journeys that you've seen kind of come up within the designer role as well.
Yeah. one benefit of the second generation is obvious, right? We don't have to go through the growing pains of starting the company and all those learning curves and things that they had to stumble through or fail at in the beginning. But we also are able to grow up around our culture, company culture, our team, growing up knowing everybody, being able to develop those relationships and build that level of trust as second generation. One thing that I think is difficult is change as second generation. You know, you're looking to the future, the impact that you can make on the future. You look back and you have so much appreciation for what your family has done for the past and gotten you where you are now. And, you know, you feel this excitement of driving where we're going. And that's going to take change, right? Embracing technology. Technology has a lot to do with our business. There's a lot to change, especially in our industry from where in the past, very furniture specific software that doesn't help us grow. We just went through a big implementation to a new operating system that is not furniture specific. It's letting us expand in flooring, letting us expand and dream about what's next for the dealer. But, you know, Trevor, you mentioned another interesting thing about design. Live design is another huge thing that we're experiencing now. And when I look back and I think about what would I want to know more about as a designer getting ready to enter the industry, is exploring more of those leadership skills and that live design skill set. The future of the dealer designer is bright. There's a lot that is going to be critical within the dealer designer. The ability to design, enhance, and change stuff in real time in front of the customer is a skill set that not all designers care to nurture that are in the designer position right now at a dealer. But as we grow as a dealer, we're looking for designers to be more part of that selling process. How are we changing our selling processes, making it more design oriented? You know, we're in a time in the industry where it's not the one size fits all. It's not black on black on black. It is critical to have the voice of the designer a part of the decision-making process that, in the end of the day, impacts the space that people are working, living, and experiencing in.
So I love that answer that you gave, and you kind of talked about two examples of things that I know that you're extremely passionate about. The first one's leadership skills, and the second one is live design. So I just want to talk a little bit more deeply about both of those categories. So when it comes to live design, when you first started, was this something that people were pushing for? Was this something that you started to adopt and then found best practices for? What are some kind of tips or guidelines you can give for people almost experimenting with live design, but haven't fully moved through with it yet?
Live design was not something that was a practice we were using when I started. You know, my role at King, I started in design, and I quickly shifted about 3 years in to the A&D consultant role. So that role focuses on building and bridging the relationship between the A&D community and the dealer, providing resources, pricing, product ideas, applications, information, and research to the designers. And I think that led me into more of a sales consultative role that was design supported. And it geared me in thinking differently about the design process as a dealer designer. And working with customers, I was able to change my perspective or change the way I present to be more consultative. And I think that that's a skill set that a lot of designers, especially the ones here at King, are embracing. And salespeople are really opening up that team sell to be more part of the conversation and drive the best decision for the customer.
I love that. And especially the one thing that's always stood out for me when it comes to live design is almost introducing it to people based on different learning styles. For people that learn and understand things visually, live design is incredible. When you have someone that's extremely knowledgeable about the program that they're presenting, you can really follow through and see, you know, almost the dream space that you're looking to create come alive right in front of you. So I'm a huge supporter of live design, and it's been a lot of fun for me learning a little bit about it. Obviously not to the extent that you know, but I saw your hand go up.
One thing I would recommend for people trying to learn more about how they can One suggestion I would make to people who are looking to explore live design is to have designers sit in on other live design sessions and learn through experience. Doing that the first time is difficult. I think a lot of salespeople on our team have a design background, and I think it becomes very natural. So also kind of mentoring under salespeople who have design backgrounds and embracing that conversation and that confidence to present design consultatively.
Absolutely. So the other thing I wanted to focus on is you mentioned leadership skills, and looking at this from kind of the perspective that I come in with, being a second generation, still learning this industry. What are some of the things that you're seeing in terms of leadership skills that you can almost recommend to the younger people coming into the industry and people that are kind of following through the footsteps to get into a leadership role?
Looking back at my road to leadership, which, while you're on it, I don't think you always know you are. You realize, what am I trying to say there? Oh, there we go. I think as second generation, you wear a lot of hats. And I know that's a very common saying. You get yourself thrown into different scenarios. And I would just encourage, second generation, third generation to jump into as much as you can. Different conversations, different experiences, different challenges, just to kind of absorb as much as you can. The other thing I would highly recommend, and again, this is something that I didn't know was happening along the way, but looking back, I got quickly involved in a variety of associations. The one that comes to mind the most is IIDA, the International Interior Design Association. Got involved in the student committee early, helping students kind of build the connection with design, and then quickly got thrown into other committees, and then into leadership roles within that association. And what that really allowed me to do was learn these soft skills of leadership, how to budget, getting your hands into costs and expenses of a year-long budget, having hard conversations with committee members and performance, things like that, when you're thrown into the workplace and you have to do that for the first time, it's difficult. So when you're doing it in a safer space, in these associations where you have a community of people there to support you, you can strengthen those soft skills and those different skill sets that you will take into your leadership role in the business and feel a lot more comfortable on how to approach those different situations. And I will say, as well, as a designer and that live design connection, there is an instance of leadership that will help you with that confidence to present in front of a customer and kind of lead the conversation for the sales team. So those skills are really important.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting to see how many people I've talked to that have really dedicated time to not only just learning amongst the journey that they have through the industry, but a lot of the learning that you do really sets you up to understand the leadership role and take into account a lot of the things that, you need to be good at to be a leader. So I want to take some time just to focus a little bit about your kind of point of view within the industry. So what are some of your biggest inspirations or biggest goals that you have being a second generation in contract furniture?
I think my passion right now is uncovering the role of the dealer in the future. And for dealerships and leaders of dealerships, I think that's a huge question. COVID made us question what is the role of the office, right? And what is the role of the dealer? So as an organization, we're exploring what's next. How can we be easier to do business with? I don't think we'll ever be able to break down the complexity of furniture parts and pieces, but we can change that customer interaction and experience in selecting furniture for their space. And I think personally, we're at a really awesome place in the industry where, again, company culture and experiences are driving those furniture decisions. And we get to work with really innovative companies of all sizes to cultivate a variety of spaces that people just love to be in. And, again, nothing against that one size fits all. There's a time and place for it. But the projects we've worked on recently are just energizing. It's excited to see where corporations, educational environments, and healthcare spaces are going. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect answer. And, it's been interesting for me too. Inside of INDEAL, we have a program that's called the iCares campaign. And every year we release a survey just to understand how our industry's comfortability is with a lot of the changes that the industry is seeing. And looking back, I spent a lot of time with Stephanie Ince, who was actually on the Trend Report podcast with myself months ago. And we talked a little bit about some of the findings that we were able to take away from what we were seeing in all of the changes. And it was really interesting to see how excited people are to getting back to the office and how many people are comfortable with kind of doing things throughout all the changes. And so the one thing that I was able to take away from all of that is, even through all of the changes that our industry has seen, the culture and the excitement to be around the people you work with is one thing that everyone was extremely excited to kind of reimburse with. So it's interesting to hear you say, how much change there has been, but how much excitement comes along with a lot of the change too. And it's something you mentioned earlier, one thing in this industry, and I know Sid and I have talked about this on the last podcast, is that change is good, but the biggest thing about change is the unknown. You're never really sure what to expect and what might come alongside some of the change. So it's interesting to see kind of how some people will take a view of the changes and how some people will see as the biggest opportunities moving forward. So that was my plug word. Chelsea, what are some of the biggest opportunities you see for the future of the industry?
Great question, Trevor. It's interesting in our market in the Midwest. A lot of the bigger companies, are waiting and waiting to figure out what's next and keeping people home. But we are a city with a lot of startups. A lot of headquarters are relocating here. Our city is growing immensely. And a lot of those mid-sized and small businesses, they're all back. And they're all focused on what can we do to make our space a place where people want to be. And it doesn't mean they need to be there all the time. Obviously, our mindset is shifting from an 8 to 5 to productive and efficient for the employee, right? Thinking of the person holistically. But when you say holistically, you also have to remember that also is your mental health, not just your physical, right? Ergonomics, check the physical, or working from home, working from office, but the mental, the well-being of the human. And so people are taking a closer look at how do we make spaces that truly make the employee a better worker and a better holistic person together. Spaces like prayer rooms or calm spaces, social spaces where people who don't collaborate all day long can interact and create relationships. Relationships at work are absolutely critical for an employee happiness. And when you talk about retaining, you want a happy employee who wants to be there, wants to do good work, and wants to continue to grow the company with the leadership team. So I think there's a lot of opportunity.
I like the approach that you're able to take on that is not only offering a solution for a company as a whole, but identifying each of the individual needs and being able to apply something that will not only benefit how they are as a worker, but how they are as a person. I think that's a really interesting perspective to look at a lot of the solutions that this industry has to offer. And one of the things that this has come up a lot of times in conversations that I've had with Sid is we're getting to the point of this industry now where the customers are almost the next generation now. So we have to be able to approach them with ideas and solutions that are beneficial to not only their team as a whole, but to the individuals. And, you mentioned it before, over the past 2 years, we've seen a lot of changes. We've seen, people not being able to do what they normally do in terms of finding comfortability. And so I think it leaves a huge opportunity. I think you touched on a lot of really great ideas there. And, the cool thing for having these types of conversations is that a lot of the listeners are people that have been making decisions for a long period of time. And I think it's good to almost plant a new seed of here's some things to keep into consideration as the newer generations come in. And, just kind of talking about some of the different directions that we can go here. I saw you just had another point come to head there, so I'll let you take it away from here.
Another opportunity, I think, for the dealer in our industry as a whole is, when we talk about human performance and human well-being, employee well-being, is not just the furniture, it's not just the space, it's the lighting, it's the materials used, and how do they impact, humans, and all this stuff to take into consideration. The role of the interior designer at the design firm has so much more to dig into and to work through and to make sure that each part of the space is successful. And so I think the biggest opportunity for dealers is to make sure that you are a consultant to the design community and A&D firms, and help them understand all the varieties of furniture that are out there to make the best decision for the customer. Design leads these decisions, but we have to obviously keep in mind the budget and lead times, which aren't our best friends right now. But we have to take all those things into consideration, and they're changing every day. So as a dealer, we really need to be prepared to be that consultative role to the designer and make sure that it's always in the customer's best interest.
Absolutely. And, you bring up a good point there of being able to offer solutions just beyond the furniture, just beyond the material, but creating almost a spot of comfortability. And, this kind of goes back to a few conversations that I've had in the past is, when I first joined the industry, it took me a while to realize that a lot of the things that I'm learning right now, not everything is a next week solution or a 3 month from now solution. It's things that can be implemented piece by piece and start to see the outcome of it in 5 years, 10 years. Obviously, as the younger generation, we got a lot of time here to make our mark on the industry. So it is interesting to see kind of the different approaches that you can take to some of these small changes that were not only sparked 2 years ago when the whole world kind of got flipped upside down, but some of the things that have been pushing for change, years ago. And so I kind of want to ask you a more of a question based a little bit back to your journey here. So if someone were to come into the dealership, what is the first 3 things that you would teach them based on your own journey and your own experience as a designer and working in a dealership?
You mentioned onboarding. I don't know if I really had an official onboarding. I think I was 8 years old when I was onboarded. So I think this is something for dealers who, we're mostly in the mid to small size business, is hard, especially because when you're hiring, it's because you're busy, right? And so we had some people on board while they were at home, and it was just even more difficult to surround them with the culture and the people that they should learn to expect from King as an organization. And now that we're back in the office and hiring still, it's just such a more comfortable onboarding, being able to be face-to-face and engulf them in the culture. One thing I want to make sure to mention is I think company culture, if anything, if we learned anything from COVID, company culture is being elevated. And if you learned anything from COVID, it is bringing your culture of a company to light. And is it a strong culture? Is it working? Is it not? And is it something that you as an organization need to work on? But I think onboarding is just huge. 3 things. Okay, let me just pause there and start that answer for you, literal. 3 things that I would do to prepare someone who's joining our business as a dealer. 1, I would get them out on an installation site if they're new to the industry, and just let them understand that we are the last one on the door. We have that last impact, that customer facing solution for the client, and get their hands on how parts and pieces go together to put the furniture together. It's an amazing eye-opening experience for designers and internal team to go on site and see really the impact that you're making back in the office. Sometimes you're sitting in your chair and it's really hard. You get frustrating emails, complicated situations. You lose sight of the end goal. And when you can get on site in front of that customer and see that smile when everything's in place and ready, it puts everything into perspective as to why we do what we do. Second thing, we always try to take everyone around and introduce the new people as they onboard. We want everyone to know the familiar face and hear a little bit about that person and where they came from. So we like to introduce them on the all staffs, make sure everyone knows who they are, where they came from, and that we're excited to have them here. Trying to think of a third thing. Will you reset your question? I needed to trigger.
Yeah, I was just asking, in terms of your journey and how you got to where you are today, what were kind of the three key things that you've taken from, not only being a second generation, but just learning the industry kind of at the fast track pace? What are three tips that you would just give to someone new coming into the industry? We got the first answer you gave was just to kind of identify what the whole process looks like in a project, really getting to see the whole image come together. The second one is really introducing them to your company culture, bringing them in and making sure that they can see the support that they have.
Mhm.
And hopefully I cleared the zone for point number three.
My third is to find a mentor. And as a family business, as a second generation, you might feel like that has to be your family, but it doesn't. There are other leaders in your company and peers in your company that can teach you a lot from an outside perspective. And I encourage you to find a mentor. It might be a family member, it might not, but finding a mentor that's someone you can talk to, learn from outside of the family perspective, I think will go a really far way. As for me, and it's been a fun adventure to kind of bring those people into your family.
So who was one of your mentors that you spent a lot of time with that kind of influenced that answer?
Yeah, Diane Flinders is our VP of sales. She has been with us for, gosh, I want to say 23 of the almost 25 years, and she's basically my second mom over here. My mom and her started the company together. Diane joined her shortly after, and they were yin and yang, and it drove the company where we're at today. And I think it's always just been really nice. I think I have my inspiration and my drive and my passion and vision from my mother. Diane has a lot of the tactical skill sets, contracts, things that as a designer, aren't educated or growing up learning. So I think getting outside of your role and getting outside of the family and finding someone to mentor and work under, I think is a really cool experience.
I agree. And you just kind of made me think a little bit there too of my journey and kind of where I got. So obviously I've spent a lot of time with Dave Bloch, and being a second generation with him, it's been an honor to be able to kind of pick away at his brain to see how he understands it. But kind of just what you mentioned there, I spent a lot of time with Dave Gatherum too, and he put a little bit more of the drive behind, he's a hustler, and he's one of the guys that if you sit down, you have a conversation with, it's a conversation you'll remember for life. And another one of my mentors was Sid, who's, the one who put me here and allowing me to have these types of conversations. So it's really cool. I've never really spent that much time looking back at my own journey to see how many people have influenced it. But it's an interesting approach because, as a second generation, I feel like a lot of people would assume that it would be your parent or whomever brought you in to kind of guide you down the path of this industry. But there's a lot of different shareholders in the successful journey that you kind of get put into as a second generation. I like the approach on that. You even made me second guess my whole journey coming up through the industry here, and mine's a little bit shorter. So it's definitely an interesting thing to think about.
You've got great mentors. They will take you far.
Absolutely. So we're kind of getting close a little bit to the time here. So Chelsea, I just want to give you a chance to kind of talk about, if there's anything else you want to add. And, the one thing I want to ask you is for all of the listeners tuning in, we bring a different perspective to how we can view the industry. We look at things a little bit differently. And for me personally, joining the industry, everything went into lockdown. I still have not been to a neocon, and I know that some of the listeners are going to hear that and be absolutely shocked and wonder how I even got to get on Sid's podcast. But it's been interesting for me because I got to take a different journey rather than, actually spending time in a dealership, in a manufacturer with a rep group to understand it. I went out and made connections with some second generations to focus on what the future of our industry can look like. I remember when I first got hired, I gave you a call just to understand a little bit more from the design side of things. And some of the people that I'm bringing on for the next few episodes, I've spent some time just understanding what their goals in the industry are. So for me, it's really kind of fun to have these types of conversation and share a lot of the people that have influenced me and my perspectives within the industry. So if there's one tip of advice or one thing that you can suggest to any of the listeners, what would you leave them with?
It's easy to get stuck in your day-to-day. I constantly say that we're investigators and firefighters, and it feels like we're doing heart surgery, and you're stressed out and you've got a lot of difficult things to work through. But I would just recommend that you surround yourself with others who are in your same shoes. I have a great roundtable that I meet with monthly of other up and coming leaders, not necessarily family business, but up and coming leaders in businesses and organizations and partial owners of issues they're running into. As a small business, you don't always have all the internal resources to get your answers fast and solutions fast. So use that roundtable, use those people you know in the industry that are in similar shoes, and open up that way of communication and constantly stay in communication about, running into this issue, what did you do? And just be there for each other. I think it creates a really interesting dynamic relationship within the industry, and you can learn a lot. We've already kind of applied a lot of the different things I've learned from our group. And it's an easy, soft, less expensive conversation to have.
I love that. And, one thing I like to take out of that too is that within this industry, it's a continuous learning journey. We've seen a lot of changes in the past 2 years, but, the inspiration to continuously learn and continuously challenge yourself is something that, I love to have reassured. It's something I believe in, and I'm glad that we're on the same page for that. So Chelsea, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you spending some time to join the Trevor Report podcast. And that's the first time you'll hear me say it. And we'll continue that on for the next few weeks. So Chelsea, thank you so much for the time. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Trevor. It's been a great time. Thank you so much for having me.
So just as we close out here, quick reminder, Trevor Bloch with INDEAL, I'm going to be taking over the podcast for the month of March. So we're going to be looking at the new generation and their perspective on the industry. So make sure you keep an eye out as we'll be having these roll out for the month of March. Thank you everyone for your time, and we'll talk to you soon. And